Yeah, it's interesting. It was a bit of an Afcon for defenders and midfielders, but I think there are a few reasons for that. Partly, I think it was that some of the big name attackers were injured. Obviously, in the case of Haller and Adingra, I suspect if Haller had been able to play more of the tournament than he did, he probably would have scored 5 or 6 goals, and I think that would have been a reasonable case to be the golden ball winner. And equally, Simon Adingra, had he been able to play more of the tournament, obviously he won the young player of the tournament, but I suspect if he'd been able to play more of the tournament, he might have even had a case to be the best player of the tournament as well. But them not being able to play as many games is probably partly contributed to that. I think obviously guys like Sadio Mane, some of the big name attackers going home early as well. Um, but I also think it's probably a tournament where we've seen the most teams either be cohesive, very cohesive in attack, and have very cohesive in possession and in terms of everything they're doing in possession, out of possession. And then the fact that that ultimately tends to put the spotlight on midfielders and defenders more because they have a more universal role. And I think we've also, as a sort of fandom and as kind of people who watch football, learnt to appreciate the parts that they play in all phases more than perhaps we're used to. I think it used to be that these tournaments were, it was just kind of who scored loads of goals, give the golden ball to that player who's been the most eye catching player in attack. But I think we've learned to appreciate the kind of universality of the roles that every player plays. But because of that, we're able to appreciate the roles that defenders and midfielders play more. So I think that's maybe why we're also appreciating them more this tournament. But equally, I guess the fact that a team like Nigeria got to the final playing that defensive style with a captain who was firstly at the centre of their defence and playing a hugely important role in helping them keep clean sheets, but then equally was scoring goals for them and being the difference maker at the other end of the pitch also probably helps us kind of appreciate the position and the role, the work that he was doing even more. So as I said, I think there's probably a few reasons why. Number one being that some of the big name attackers were either injured, so didn't play the whole tournament, or they went home early, or obviously in the case of Simhan, just didn't quite fire. But then also I think the kind of the great cohesion that teams have shown, and also our ability to appreciate the roles of defenders and midfielders and the contributions that they play to that cohesion and the kind of the whole package of a team's play in and out of possession probably helps us appreciate them and makes it feel more like the midfielders and defenders have been important. And then additionally, I guess the fact that they actually have been important. Someone like Troost-Ekong at the heart of the Nigerian team as a defender, and then also scoring goals, being so critical to how they play. Plus, obviously, the Ivorians, the two Ivorian midfielders, Kessie and Fofana, so crucial to what they do in terms of the pressing, but then also it's so crucial to what they do in terms of their in possession work, the work they do in build up, the way they progress the ball, the way they create, the way they arrive to finish, all those things. I just think, yeah, it's been a tournament where those types of players have stood out more. But as I say, I think it's also a tournament where maybe there's been fewer outstanding attackers for various reasons, and then also we've been able to really probably appreciate the roles that those guys play more, perhaps this tournament than we have in tournaments gone by. To be honest, I think what really helped the Ivory Coast during the tournament was staying true to their identity that they came into the tournament with. I think it would have been very, very easy after losing that Jocking game 4-0 to really kind of freak out and try and change, and for MS5 to try and drastically change things. But I think the way in which they were able to be successful was by really kind of sticking to very much the same plan that they came into the tournament with. And I think that really helped them overcome that potentially disruptive mid-tournament change of coaches, because they were able to sort of stay broadly true to or say very, very much true to the same plan. And I think that is a plan that had served them very, very well coming into the tournament. When they came into the tournament, they were one of the best offensive teams in Africa. They were very, very good at possessing the ball. They were good at having long possession sequences. They were good at progressing the ball. And then they were very, very diverse in the final third. They were good at dribbling into the box. They were good at passing into the box. They were good at crossing into the box. So they had a very diverse offensive threat, and that was a product, obviously, of the pieces that they had. They've obviously got exciting wing backs. They've got centre backs who are good at passing and confident with the ball. They've got midfielders, particularly the two number 8s, who love to get up and down the pitch, who help him build up. They then move through the midfield. They progress the ball, and then they arrive in the finishing phase as well to contribute there, where they can create, they can score. They've got great dynamic wingers, a variety of different profiles there on the wings. And obviously they've got a number of different attackers, one of whom the standout, of course, being Sebastian Haller. So I think when they came into the tournament, they had this brilliant, diverse attacking threat. And I think one of the good things was that MSFI didn't drastically go away from the approach that they were taking in terms of the way that was all structured, which has enabled them to kind of overcome that shocking defeat when they were kind of caught on the counter a few times, shot by some worldly goals, and really overcome that. I think, so shocking, I think it was unfortunate in many ways, unlucky in other ways, a bit of a flash in the pan, really. They were able to overcome that and then obviously get through to where they are now, where in the semi-final and the final in particular, they were actually quite dominant again. And that really was about staying true to that identity that they came into the tournament with. And I thought that was really, really positive. But then I guess the other aspects to that, in addition to staying true to that identity, was they did get Sebastian Haller back, which I think made a big difference to their offensive threat, particularly in the semi-final and the final. I thought he was huge in terms of the threat he was carrying in those games. Adingra obviously was back again, and goes out saying what a big contribution he made to them when he was back. I think he was the most effervescent of their wingers, the most dangerous, and I suspect in some respects for some of the African teams was the kind of the least well known, and it made their life very difficult dealing with him and his ability. And then you can see things like home support as well probably did help them during the tournament as well. But as I say, I think really the big thing was staying true to that approach, particularly the offensive approach, and the way in which that obviously then bled into their defensive, being able to press high, be aggressive, and really try and limit teams, prevent teams building up, allow them to sort of regain the ball not long after losing it, which ultimately allowed them to kind of dominate possession. This sort of overall very proactive approach where they look to dominate games, they have a high work rate, and obviously the quality that they have throughout the team, that was ultimately what, in my opinion, helped them. And the big thing was MS5 staying true to that, despite the game against Equatorial Guinea, despite obviously the loss to Nigeria before that, because that meant that they retained that cohesion, and they by far looked like one of the most cohesive, well put together teams. And I do think Fai deserves immense credit. I think he made some tactical changes, some structural changes as well. For example, Jean-Michel Seri coming in, just being more of a destroyer, had the ability to potentially limit some of their issues in transition. I think maybe their fullbacks were a bit more pragmatic. So Faye made a couple of minor tweaks, I think, but I think overall it was staying true to that style that they had, being that proactive, being offensive. I think that ultimately has helped them get where they are and ultimately win the tournament. Yeah, I think, well, look, on the flip side to the Ivorians' very proactive, positive approach, you had the Nigerian approach, which, having come into the tournament looking like they were going to be proactive and positive, they had just an absolute array of attacking talent, some doubts about their midfield depth, and then, reasonable volume of defenders. But Pesero then sort of suddenly changed his approach going into game 2, where the more offensive kind of 4-2-4 failed to produce a result in the first game. He decided that actually what he was going to do was play this sort of 5-2-3, 3-4-3, whatever you want to call it, formation, be extremely tight at the back and be completely reliant on essentially the quality of your attackers to produce individual moments in isolation situations. There was very little offensive cohesion. There was so little coordination between players. Players were being asked to do things very much, I said, in isolation, 1v1, sometimes 1v2, 1v3, even 1v4, being asked to sort of make something happen. But this is based on being very stout at the back, conceding 0 or 1 goals a game, and hoping that you can create something, whether it's set piece, whether it's getting a penalty, or someone else creating some moment of magic to actually keep you going in games and eke out results. And Nigeria ultimately made to pay for that in the final. They didn't come to play. They continue to look very offensively disorganised, disconnected, lacking in plans. And when that's the case, and when you come up against a team who are wanting to dominate possession, that can be difficult. And it puts you in a situation where when you come up against a team with the quality that the Ivory Coast have, firstly, they can hurt you in a way that perhaps some of the other teams that Nigeria have faced weren't able to, in this tournament. And equally, those moments of individual quality that you're looking for your attackers are just fundamentally harder to generate when you're playing against better defenders. And I think we saw that the Ivorian defence and the Ivorian defenders were able to contain the likes of Samuel Chukwueze, Ademola Lookman, and Victor Osimhen. And Nigeria just didn't have the reinforcements, didn't have the rest of that offensive quality, whether it was cohesion, whether it was just more bodies coming forwards to really unsettle the Ivorians. And so they didn't carry that. They weren't able to create those, flashes of offensive moments really that they were looking to create, or that they would have otherwise looked to create. And then on the defensive side, they were under more pressure than they perhaps have been. They had to face more quality than they perhaps have had to face. And I think Simon Adingra in particular was obviously causing them massive issues. And then in addition to that, unfortunately, if you are going to be a team that has to be very tight at the back, you can't afford to have the types of disastrous defensive organisational failures that they had for the equalising goal, because there wasn't a routine to free up Kessie on the back post. He was just standing from the moment they were setting up to take that corner. He was just standing free, and no one picked him up. So I think Nigeria ultimately made to pay for their negative approach. The fact that approach ultimately didn't mesh hugely well with the quality that the Ivorians had, because the Nigerians weren't able to create those moments that they look for in attack. They were facing a more dangerous attack than they've had to face, and then ultimately also had the defensive organisational failures themselves. So they were ultimately made to pay for being negative, and they were poor as a result. They didn't carry an attacking threat really. And they were under pressure for large parts of the game. And even the counter-attacking threat was severely hamstrung ultimately. So in some respects, credit to the Ivory Coast. In many respects, in fact, credit to the Ivory Coast, but equally a shame that Nigeria just really didn't come to play and probably didn't give the attacking players that they do have the opportunity to really show the quality that they have.